Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. I am Violette de Ayala. I'm the founder and CEO of FemCity, and you're joining me today for our Monday Motivation Series. Today, I have a beautiful guest for us. She is from our FemCity Global Program. She's amazing. I've only worked with you, I think, Laura, twice. It's our second time doing something together. The first time was amazing. So I know we're in for a really amazing time again. Laura Beauparlant. I know I messed that up, and I speak Spanish. You would think I would figure out how to say a French last name.
Beauparlant. Just missed the R. You were very close.
Beauparlant. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Got it.
And
you know, everybody knows how to pronounce my name.
Exactly. We're gonna do a whole after show with that. Listen, my last name is really hard to pronounce as well, and I every time I'm on a podcast, I go from myself. I have to describe it like day, like the day outside. And then I do ya la, like a hot karate chop, and then like people are like, okay, because it's horrible to pronounce.
But now I'm going to remember that. Like it's
exactly
that association.
Yep. Which is what you gave me for your last name, which I will practice. Anyway, all right. So what we have for today, we're going to talk about how to be a public speaker. And the reason why we are talking about this today is because I know a lot of femmes are looking at 2022 and stepping forward in the ways that they feel called to do so, or they're feeling pulled, or they recognize that there's a great opportunity when you leverage the stage by being a public speaker for your personal brand. There's a lot of great benefits in that. And we have a class that was taught by Jenna Rodriguez also, if you want to check that out. It's in the FemCity library on how to leverage public speaking, even during pandemic times. Today, I have asked Laura to join me in the conversation. She's an expert. She is a public speaker. She is amazing. And again, last time I think you were on with me, it was also about public speaking.
I think it was about making a speaker sheet.
That's right. It was about how to make a speaker sheet. Yeah. So if you missed that, definitely check that out in the FemCity library. That was a great discussion class. I can't remember which format it was, but how to create a speaker sheet. So let's go ahead and get started. You want to share a little bit about yourself, Laura, before we dive in? Because some femmes may not know you.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Laura Beauparlant. I'm the founder of Lab Creative. We do branding and design for small businesses, mostly kind of solo entrepreneurs, micro, small, service-based, ambitious entrepreneurs. I am a keynote speaker. I'm an author, a mom. Many things, many titles. I wear many hats every day. So that's me. And I've been speaking for a number of years and happy to share some of the things that I've learned along the way and see how it can help some others.
I love that. And by the way, your voice is so amazing. I think I may have told you this in the past, like voiceover, like your voice is so perfect. I know you already have many hats that you're wearing, but I'm going to throw another one out there, that voiceover work. If you're not doing that, I mean, it's just or if you don't have, or a podcast, your voice is just, I can tell a lot by how a person will speak on stage based on the way they speak like this, honestly. So anyway, all right. So
thanks for the ego boost.
Yeah, no, it was all truth for sure. Who would benefit from being a public speaker? Because again, I think that there are so many women in our community that do want to become public speakers. Perhaps they've been fearful of doing that. Perhaps they don't have the belief, the confidence that they can be a public speaker. Who would benefit from being on that stage as an expert public speaker?
The reality is anybody can benefit. I think it's probably mostly service-based businesses as opposed to like a product. Like if you sell, products, you might not have the same ability to, what are you speaking about? So it's really, if you've got a unique spin on the subject that you are talking about, right? When people are hiring speakers, they want a new perspective. They don't, when people are hiring me, they're not hiring me because I talk about branding. They're hiring me for the perspective I bring, the unique lens that I bring, and the entertainment that I bring to the topic of branding. So you have to, it's called edutainment, right? You want to educate people, but you want to entertain them. Nobody wants a dry speaker who's just got slides full of copy and reading off their deck and, boring. So, if you've got a really interesting perspective, a unique process that you've developed, those are the kinds of things that you can really create a talk around. And, I think we think about speaking in as one thing, like standing on a stage, giving a keynote. Yes, I do that, but it could also be a workshop. It could be a workshop that you host with somebody else. It could be you host your own workshop and people pay and they come to your workshop. That is still speaking. It could be you as a guest on a podcast. That is also you speaking. It could be you doing a webinar. We think we kind of put this into this like, oh my God, I have to speak on a stage. And that's terrifying for many people to be in person in front of a lot of people. I love it. In fact, I've missed it a lot. But you could start off with a workshop that you do virtually or a webinar or some different things. Now there's some framework to do those well, but it's so valuable and it benefits you so much because it gets you out there in front of your audience. And it allows other people to maybe promote this for you. And it helps you leverage other people's platforms. So, we've got social media, we've got an email list, typically, you've got all of these things, but that only has so much reach. So when you're a speaker, you get to leverage the audience where you're speaking and get more people following you. I've built my business on speaking and a lot on referrals, but speaking has been a huge lead because I get on a stage and all of a sudden I can have 50, 100, 10, 600 people that now know who I am, that might be joining my email list, that might want to work with me. So it can be scary for a lot of people, but speaking is a great way to reach a ton of new people and bring them into your ecosystem.
I love that. I used to do a lot of speaking years ago, and for whatever reason, I kind of closed myself off to it because I was like, oh, I've got all this other stuff to do. But you're so absolutely right. It is a way to exponentially grow your brand because you have, like you said, 6, 10, 600 people listening to you. And I think also, I love that saying, humans do business with humans they love. And if you can be on that stage and do a really great job in presenting a unique perspective, like you said, an interesting lens, then you have an audience that are wanting to follow up and say, well, what did she do? I love the way she shared that, or I love that sentence, or I love that tip, or I loved her story. Let me go ahead and follow her. Let me go ahead and reach out and get on her email list. And from that, you can really develop great opportunities to come through that
Absolutely.
will then obviously be monetized. So let's ask this question. Let's say there are a couple of femmes that are listening and say, okay, Laura, you're making me feel better. I recognize that I can be a speaker in a smaller platform, because I think also they think like TEDx, like they think like really big, but you can start small, podcasts, putting your own webinar together, formulating that kind of. But what's your best advice, I guess, for femmes that are wanting to become professional public speakers? Like where should they even start to get into that space?
Yeah. And again, it's not starting with the TEDx, right? Like that's where you get to eventually. That's where I'm at. I'm at that place where that's where I'm looking to be. But I've been speaking for, a decade. And I think it starts with just brainstorming. What could you talk about? Like, what is your unique expertise? What's different about you from other people in your industry? Because like I said, people are going to want to listen to you if you bring that unique lens. So start brainstorming some ideas on that. So the first thing you just need to have is a title and a description of your talk. You don't need to even write the talk yet. In fact, don't. Just write the learning objectives. So typically when I'm applying for a speaking engagement, they're like, what's the title? What's the talk about? And what are the 3 like key takeaways or learning objectives? And so if you could at least map that out, then you can actually start pitching that to people and start getting people to sign up to have you do the talk before you've even built it, because it may not be a subject that people want. And there's no point in building a talk and spending hours of time. And like I work as speaking coaches. I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars working with coaches on my speaking to develop it, to really hone in on it and practice. But before you do that, you kind of want to know that your concept and your topic is something that people are going to want to hear. Maybe that's where you test it out on a webinar or test it out in a, your own kind of a workshop. So it's at least with people that maybe closer colleagues or contacts, and then you get that feedback, like, here, I'm going to present this to you. I want your honest feedback so that you can start to hone in on that. There are lots of tools out there for improving. I work with a company named Talk Boutique that are here in Toronto, but she works with people all over. And she's got an amazing framework to help people build out a signature talk. And as I said, I've worked with her many times, but she's got other resources for people that are maybe just more starting out. So there's lots of opportunities to at least figure out how to take these ideas and narrow it down. But I would definitely start with just brainstorming and creating that title, description, and the learning objectives, and just start getting it out there to see if it's something that people will latch onto.
I love that. And I think we spoke about this last time when we were here teaching us about how to create a speaker page, but you can also go ahead and add it to your website so that people can see the array of topics that you can cover with just the title, the description, kind of like, I love that you mentioned like the intents, like what is it you want to teach or share so that people understand when they're going to book you on a podcast or book you to be a speaker at their event. And I also, go ahead.
I was just going to say, start with one talk.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people make the mistake of having a bunch and just focus on creating one killer talk. And then other ones will come from that, or a different version, or you customize it. But I agree. I have a page on my website that is a speaking page. It's got pictures of me on stages. It's got where I've spoken. It's got a link to my speaker sheet, how to book me, the title and description of my talks, all of those things. So you can add that to your website, as I said, before you've even fully developed the talk. So at least people you're seeding it that this is something that you do.
Yeah. The signature talk, I created this signature talk a couple of years ago, and it's very powerful and very moving, which I love. I love to get not people crying. Like I'm like, oh, everyone's crying. That means I did a good job. But I do like to impact people. So in a positive way. And it's interesting. I spoke at an event like 3 weeks ago and in South Texas. And I was supposed to talk about something, but when I was hearing the other speakers before I went on, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do the one that I had planned. I'm going to go back to my signature one because I think that's going to be more touchy for the crowd, for the audience, kind of like fitting into what the other speakers were. So I love that you mentioned that because I find that when you have a really good signature talk that you've worked so much time on and you've practiced and you've rehearsed it, you can always have that in your back corner because sometimes there's an opportunity where someone's like, hey, just go up there and say something. Just go up and like say a couple words. You're like, what? So at least if you have that, a really good, strong one that can be applicable in so many different ways, it's very moving and very touching and authentic. I feel like you can always kind of pull that out when needed as well. All right. So final advice that you have for those that want to become public speakers. You mentioned, just to kind of recap, you mentioned pretty much just get started. You were saying like, there are sort of smaller platforms to definitely be organized, be prepared, think about the title, the description, think about what kind of impact you want to have, what your intention is. Obviously, you want to connect it to something about your brand. We haven't talked about that, but I'm thinking, I know you speak beyond marketing, but you probably connect your talk with what you do, correct?
Yeah, I think, everything I speak about ties back to what we do. Sometimes but it's got to be bigger than that because lots of people are talking about branding, but it's not just about the branding, right? Like I just did a talk I was sharing with you about vulnerability and authenticity and how that affects. I talked about how people are using vulnerability and it's actually sabotaging their business without them realizing it because they think I need to be vulnerable and do it in this way. But so even though I'm talking about these concepts, I'm focusing on how this is impacting entrepreneurs and small business owners and the perception of your brand. So that's sort of the overarching lens that everything I'm speaking about has to do with that perception of your brand and that connection with your audience.
Love that. Yeah, because I see a lot of times some of our members will start creating their pitches. And then I feel like it's so not what I envision their brand to be. It's so like out here, which I think is good also. But you want to, if you're doing it, to leverage that platform for opportunities that will be able to monetize, those more speaking gigs or more people calling you to find out more about your services. I think that connection has to be there, but it doesn't have to be the focus of it. Like you were saying, that your piece was, this piece, but it was also connected about like how you can market yourself better, more successfully.
Exactly. Yeah.
Love that. Well, I don't see any questions. If you have any questions, we're about to wrap up. Of course, you can always reach out to Laura if you have any other questions. Final advice that you have for those that are looking to become public speakers in 2022?
I think it's start to look at where you would want to speak, like where are the audiences of the people. So if you're thinking, so for me, it's like, I want to speak in front of audiences that have my dream clients in it. So I know what groups those are not, and I know what groups those are. So start to look at events, communities, different places where the kinds of people that you want to work with are. So I think that's really key. And then start to look at who have they had speak on your topic in the past, right? Just to make sure it's kind of like a bit of a, competitive analysis. Like, what are other people saying in this space? And just start doing a bit of that research. You can look up things like on Twitter, there's a hashtag call for speakers. It's kind of hit or miss, then start tapping into your community and saying, hey, I'm looking for speaking opportunities. This is something I'm planning on doing in 2022. Do you have any contacts with event planners that do events for this type of people? Do you have any, communities that you're in? Or, something that I've been doing a lot of is actually connecting with other entrepreneurs, like coaches, who their audience, their community is filled with ideal clients for me. And then I do like a masterclass for that community. That's also speaking. So again, it's still leveraging somebody else's community. So really start to hone in on who you want to speak for, and then go out and try to curate a list, make yourself a spreadsheet of like, here are conferences, here are different people who have my clients in their communities, and start reaching out and asking for help. I mean, just recently I started reaching out to some of my colleagues and contacts saying, I'm looking to get back on physical stages as much as possible in 2022. This is what I'm looking for. And I've already gotten a number of engagements. Some are virtual still, but I've got a number of engagements secured just by asking.
Love that. So we do have a comment that came through. I just want to share it and then respond. So advice for those wanting to start a podcast. I think that's a whole other conversation because I want to dive into that. So whoever asked, I have taken note of that. I will add it to the January calendar. And then also, I believe this might be the same person, advice and good interview questions. We got you. I will go ahead and work on that. So I'm so glad. Thank you so much for asking those questions. I'll add it to our January calendar because again, that's a little bit more lengthy, that topic. I want to just spend at least 20 minutes on there because I want to make sure that we do it right. I love, by the way, that you mentioned doing the research on what the other speakers have shared on that platform. And also what I love about what you're sharing is that you are really putting the exclamation point on the aspect of preparing. Like, make sure you prepare, because it's another thing that I've seen through FemCity is that sometimes we have members that are on the stage, but you can tell they haven't prepared. So you want to make sure that you are prepared. You are on a stage where so many people are watching you. You want to have it all together. You may make mistakes. You may forget a word here and there. Maybe that the dress you wanted to wear, you're not wearing. All those little things will happen. But the preparation, the research really says so much about your professionalism. And as you do anything, you do everything. So if you show up like that, that really will make you stand out, because people will say, wow, she was so prepared. She was so on point. She had everything together. That is going to, again, so many people are going to be watching that you want to be as prepared as possible and take the time.
Yeah.
Don't speed through it. It really makes a huge difference. Those little things make a huge, huge difference.
Yeah. And you can still be nervous. That's legitimate.
Yeah.
But you can also be prepared and still a little nervous. Right?
Yes, absolutely. You know what I do for my nervousness is because I still have it. I have to say, even though I speak and I can pretty much speak anywhere, anytime, like whenever you tell me to go, I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I always think about my intention, and that calms me down. I think to myself, what is my intention? What do I want them to feel from me? What is the biggest gift I can give them? And when I go back from that place of service, my nerves go away because I feel like they will understand and know my intention just being there for them, that I'm really there for them. And that has helped me so much.
So I'll share. Do we have another
Yes, of
minute? I just
course.
want to share that. So, oh shoot, now I forget what I was just going to say. So I had something else. So I'm going to go back to that. So one thing that I touched briefly about talking about vulnerability, and one thing that I've seen a number of speakers do is share things that are still too raw, depending on what you're talking about. And so I really believe in teaching from your scars, not from your wounds. So I heard that saying a number of years ago. And I just want, when you're thinking about speaking, make sure that you're teaching from a scar, that's something that is healed. If there's any of those stories that you integrate into your talk, which usually there are. I've been to events or heard speakers where I was repelled, like I wanted to flee the room. It was so uncomfortable for myself, for the other people, because you're like, they're still working through whatever this is. So just a little tip when you're thinking about that is, where am I in this journey of whatever this experience? Is this a story to tell now? Maybe this is a story to tell later once this is healed. But the stage is not a place to like barf your trauma and your, struggles in the moment. If you can share it from a different place, a place of learning and growth, then that's very different than just like using your audience as your therapist. That goes for social media or from the stage. And I've seen it done in both of those places.
I love that. Yes, I love that. So I recently shared on Instagram, like 2 weeks ago. I don't even remember time. I have no concept of time. 2020 has like botched that up for me. I have no idea. I was like 2 weeks ago. It could have been like yesterday. But it was so my mother died as an addict, and I was able to share kind of my lessons in forgiving her. And I was able to share it without feeling anything, which, because I had just gotten to the point where like I had forgiven. So I wrote this whole entire thing. And I think the reason why it did so well on social media is because I wrote it from that perspective. Like you were saying, I was not a wound anymore. It was a scar. And I felt like I could share my lessons learned to help others. And I think it did well. If I had written that 2 years ago, it would have been like, it would have been like all over, and people would have been like, unfollow. Like this chick, nope, unfollow. Because like you were saying, we want to learn from each other, but we have to be ready to share from that place where we can be of service to other humans.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So Becky Russell, another FemCity Global member, and she runs our FemCity Johnson City community, which is growing really, really nicely. Great info, definitely on my list for 2022. Becky's got a lot of stuff cooking for 2022. And of course, we have someone else who said yes to, I believe, what we were sharing. All right. So here's a question that came through. What if you have healed, but the audience wants to know more about the specifics about your trauma? How much do you share, or how to refocus the attention back to what you're currently talking about?
It's a great question. I feel like that could be its own
talk
in and of itself. I think you just don't want to get into that place of like commiseration. Like I think people want to feel like they are being seen and heard, and they have that, maybe they have that shared trauma, but you don't want to bring yourself to that place where you're just sharing the dark details to satisfy some strange need that they have. So I feel like we could probably dive even deeper into that. I mean, I do share some of my past stories. I think I've shared on this platform that I was in a head-on collision with a drunk driver when I was 18. And so I've shared some of those stories over the years, but I don't share any of the real trauma and all of that. I share it from a place of like healing and that. And so I really don't, I'll share some of the details maybe, but then I'll bring it back to, where I really want to focus. And I think as long as you can share it too from a place of, it's not about not being emotional, but when you said like, you could share it from a place where you didn't feel that same way inside. Like, I can talk about it without breaking down and crying. And so then it's not about getting sympathy. And I think it's just sharing enough details so people feel like, oh, she understands me. But sure, you don't let them stay in that trauma, because that's just perpetuating this survival mentality as opposed to thriving. And so it's just really trying to lift them up from that place of surviving. But great question.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
That helps.
Yeah, it helped. For sure, it helped me. So I'm sure it helped everybody else as well. Thank you so much, Laura. And for those folks that want to learn more about the work that you are doing in this world, what is the best way for them to find you?
They can go to our website, labcreative.ca is our website. And on social, we're Lab Creative Inc. As well. So those are their handles across all the platforms.
Awesome. And we'll go ahead and tag her also over on LinkedIn and on Facebook. And then when we add it to Instagram, so we'll make it really easy for you to connect with Laura. Thank you so much, Laura. This was amazing. I think we have two more. From all this, we have 2 more classes to do for our Fems. So I'm actually trying to think of like January. I just released the calendar to get speakers and panelists for that. So I'm thinking where to put in the one about starting a podcast, because I know there are a couple of women in our community that want to start a podcast. So thank you again for all of you for joining us. And we will get onto those topics. And if you've never tried out FemCity, of course, you can always head over to femcity.com and try out FemCity for free for 30 days. We will see you on Wednesday. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.